11:43 a.m. ship's time. The Barents Sea, 340 nautical miles northeast of Severomorsk, inside the Arctic transit corridor that Russia regards as its own, but that international law places beyond any sovereign claim. USS The Sullivans, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, 9,200 tons, hull number DDG-68, had been holding course at 12 knots on a steady northeast heading for 31 minutes. The sea ran at 3-meter swells, gray-green water under a low overcast, the kind of Arctic sky that sits on the water like a ceiling. Visibility was good, which meant that when the two contacts appeared on radar at 11 nautical miles, the tactical team in the ship's Combat Information Center, CIC, had no ambiguity about what they were looking at. 2 Kilo-class submarines, running on the surface, converging from opposite quadrants at identical speeds. CPA, closest point of approach, calculated within 90 seconds, 800 yards to port, 1,100 yards to starboard. Both tracks on an intercept heading, both closing at a rate that would put them alongside the Sullivans in approximately 22 minutes. The captain had been in the Arctic before. He had 28 years at sea, the last 6 commanding destroyers in theaters from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. He had never seen a dual surfacing on opposite quarters. He stood at the center of the bridge, both hands flat on the console lip, and looked at the radar display. He did not alter course. Bridge radio, channel 16, the International Maritime Distress and Contact frequency, was silent. It would stay silent for the next 47 minutes. In this part of the ocean, at this distance, with 2 military submarines rising from depth and assuming a precision formation around a U.S. Navy warship, that silence was not administrative. The sea was saying something in the only language submarines use when they choose to surface in daylight. We are here, we are deliberate, and we will not explain ourselves. The captain's standing orders had been written for exactly this geometry. He reached back, without looking, and set his coffee on the console behind him. His hands stayed free. The 2 Kilo-class submarines completed their surfacing procedures at 11:51 a.m. From the bridge of the Sullivans, visible to the naked eye, both boats were fully on the surface. Conning towers, also called sails, breaking clearly above the water, their black hulls running parallel to the American destroyer's track. The western Kilo sat 800 yards off the port beam. The eastern Kilo sat 1,100 yards off the starboard beam. Both were matching the Sullivan's course. Both were matching her speed. Within 4 minutes of surfacing, both submarines had settled into a course and speed lock so precise that a navigation plotter in CIC watching the tracks would see 3 parallel lines, spaced unevenly, but holding their geometry like instruments in a formation. This is what coordinated pressure looks like when it is designed to never cross the line that forces a response. 2 submarines, 1 American destroyer, a deliberate pincer with 800 yards of open water on each side, enough to argue the channel was free, not enough to feel free. The Kilo-class submarine is a diesel-electric boat, roughly 3,000 tons submerged, about 74 meters long, just under the length of a football field. On the surface, in moderate swells, it rides low and heavy, its sail cutting through the chop with the indifference of something built to resist far more hostile pressure than a North Atlantic sea state. The crew visible on the sails of both submarines were small figures at this distance. With binoculars, they resolved into men watching back. What the formation was designed to accomplish had nothing to do with torpedoes. The Kilo-class submarines alongside the Sullivans were not a weapons threat in the conventional sense. They were a claim. Russia has never recognized the Barents Sea transit corridor as uncontested international water. Every passage by a NATO vessel is, in Moscow's view, a provocation. The dual surfacing was a performance of that view, physical, visible, sustained. The message was geometric. You are transiting what we consider our water, and we are here in numbers, on the surface, where you can see us, because we want you to understand that we regard your presence as a contest. The captain understood it perfectly. The question was not what the submarines meant. The question was whether the Sullivans would adjust course to open the gap. At 11:57 a.m., minute 6 of the sustained formation, the tactical officer, or TAO, the senior officer in CIC responsible for managing the ship's sensor picture and weapons state, reported CPA stable. Both kilos were holding distance, neither closing nor opening. The formation was locked. The helmsman from the second watch had been at the wheel since 11:30 a.m. He was 23 years old. He had spent 13 months at sea and had been through 2 previous freedom of navigation transits, what sailors call FONOPs, in the South China Sea and the Strait of Hormuz. Neither had looked like this. He held the wheel with both hands and watched the compass heading. The compass heading did not change. The compass heading would not change for the next 41 minutes. He did not know that yet. He knew the contact geometry from the bridge speaker updates. He could feel, through the ship's hull and up through the deck plates and into the balls of his feet, the slight roll variation that comes when a large diesel submarine surfaces at close range and its displacement changes the local wave pattern. It was a physical sensation without a name in any training manual he had ever read. 6 minutes into the sustained formation, at exactly 11:57 a.m., the Sullivans transmitted a single advisory on Channel 16. The message was straightforward. This vessel is a United States Navy warship conducting a lawful transit of international waters. The 2 submarines on either beam heard it. Their radio operators logged it. Neither submarine replied. The silence that followed was not a communications failure. It was an answer. Channel 16 went quiet again. It would stay quiet for the remaining 41 minutes of the encounter. By minute 12, the formation was established well enough that the most experienced lookout on the bridge could pick up the kilos without binoculars in decent visibility. The western submarine at 800 yards was close enough that the sail crew was intermittently visible. Small human shapes at the top of the conning tower, angled toward the Sullivans. Not threatening, watching. At 12:02 p.m., minute 11, the TAO sent a revised picture to the bridge. The Vishnya-class intelligence-gathering ship, a vessel purpose-built for signals collection, the VMF's equivalent of an airborne surveillance platform running at sea level, had been tracked at 12 nautical miles since the beginning of the encounter. It had now altered course. Its new track placed it closing to 2 nautical miles off the Sullivans' port quarter, trailing the formation. A Vishnya at 2 nautical miles in active collection mode is not a participant in the geometry of the standoff. It is a recorder of it. Every radar emission, every electronic signal, every radio transmission from the Sullivans was being cataloged at a range close enough to distinguish individual system signatures. The captain did not change course. By this point, the formation had been running for 12 minutes. The Sullivans had spent 12 minutes as the geometric center of a Russian surveillance envelope. 2 attack submarines on her beams, an intelligence collection platform pulling astern, the entire package moving northeast, at 12 knots through Arctic water that Russia considers its own. The fuel expenditure for this operation alone, 3 military vessels conducting a sustained multi-platform coordination, was running into the tens of thousands of dollars per hour. The message that all that fuel was buying was, "We will outlast your patience." The captain's wife had sent a message to his personal device at 3:44 a.m. ship's time, when he was already on the bridge for the transit approach. The message was still sitting unread in the secure safe in his stateroom. He would not look at it until this watch was relieved. He had made that decision when he first took the con, before the kilos surfaced. When this was still an uneventful Arctic passage, it was still the right decision. He was certain of that. He was less certain how long he would be certain. At minute 18, the formation had not changed. 3 vessels locked in parallel tracks through gray Arctic water, the overcast pressing down, the swells running at a steady 3 meters from the northwest. The Sullivans' hull logged a 6-degree roll in the port beam swell cycle. The western kilos wake interacting with the natural sea state at 800 yards, the combined effect reaching the destroyer's waterline as a low, rolling push that the helmsman felt in the wheel and corrected for with a pressure that was barely 2 degrees and entirely automatic. His hands had not made a deliberate correction in 9 minutes. He was holding the wheel in the same position. The compass heading had not changed. Somewhere on a cargo routing screen in an automated maritime coordination system, a Liberian-flagged container ship 60 nautical miles south of the formation was adjusting its arrival estimate for Hammerfest. Its officer of the watch was making coffee. The container ship's crew would never know the formation was there. At minute 23, the Vishnya completed its approach. 2 nautical miles off the Sullivans port quarter, it settled into a trailing course and began what electronic intercept systems aboard the destroyer identified as a continuous broadband SIGINT sweep, signals intelligence collection across all the frequencies the ship used for internal and external communication. Not a jamming operation, a listening operation. The distinction matters. Jamming is a hostile act. Listening is a statement. It says, "We are collecting everything, and everything you do here will be analyzed, cataloged, and used to understand your capabilities and your responses under pressure." The captain understood the implication. The response to a listening operation is operational discipline. Everything transmitted from the Sullivans in the next 24 minutes needed to be exactly what would be transmitted on any normal day. No unusual communication patterns, no tactical chatter that would reveal response planning, no indication in any signal that the formation had produced anxiety aboard the ship. Whether it had produced anxiety was a different question. At this point, 23 minutes into the formation, the Sullivans had 2 Kilo-class submarines on her beams and an intelligence collection platform 3 miles astern, all matching her course and speed with the precision of a rehearsed exercise. The TAO and CIC had been on continuous watch for 19 hours. His relief had been scheduled for 11:30 a.m. The watch rotation had been delayed at the captain's request when the Kilos first surfaced. The TAO was running on coffee and the specific kind of focus that comes from being very good at something in a situation where being very good at it is the only option. He had not told the captain he was tired. The captain knew. One subtle thing had changed at minute 23 that the captain noticed and the TAO had logged without yet announcing. The eastern Kilo's heading had shifted by 0.8 degrees to starboard. Not enough to open the formation gap, not enough to be unambiguous, enough to track. He would wait. He had seen this before, not this exact situation, but the shape of it. The 0.8 degree shift was the kind of micro-adjustment that comes when a vessel conducting a deliberate formation hold runs into the first signs of crew or navigation friction. He logged it internally, said nothing, and kept both hands flat on the console lip. The standoff had now been running for 23 minutes. For all 23 of those minutes, the Sullivans had held exactly the course she was on when the submarines surfaced. The Russian formation had done exactly what it intended to do. The corridor remained contested. The clock was still running. At 12:14 p.m., minute 23 precisely, the TAO and CIC made the recommendation the captain had been expecting. The recommendation was to activate the ship's fire control radar in active tracking mode, with both Kilo-class submarines designated simultaneously as tracked contacts. The fire control radar system on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is built for one function: to provide precise targeting data for the ship's weapon systems. When it goes active against a contact, the contact's own electronic warning receivers pick it up immediately. The signal is distinct, different in character from a navigation radar or search radar. Any competent crew aboard either submarine, upon hearing their warning receivers begin to signal, would know within seconds exactly what was pointed at them and what that designation meant. This was not a weapons release. No weapons were armed, no missiles were on the rail. The fire control radar designation, in the language of the gray zone, was a statement of capability delivered at high volume. We are holding you in a firing solution, both submarines, simultaneously. If this situation deteriorates in any direction, we are already prepared. The captain authorized it at 12:14 p.m. Active fire control tracking on both submarines commenced 15 seconds later. On the bridge, the helmsman heard the internal system status change through the ship's network. He did not look up from the compass. His hands did not move. The compass heading did not change. On the bridge wing, the watch officer raised his binoculars toward the western Kilo at 800 yards and held them there. Through the lenses at that range, the sail crew was visible. 3 figures. One appeared to be looking back with his own optics. The watch officer did not lower his binoculars. The formation had been running for 24 minutes. The fire control radar had been active for 60 seconds. The Vishnya continued its collection sweep astern. 300 yards of Arctic water separated the Sullivans' portside rail from the surface of the closest Kilo's hull. If something went wrong, a navigation error, a mechanical casualty, a moment of poor judgment by any helmsman in any of the 3 vessels, the minimum reaction time at combined maneuvering speeds was measured in seconds, not minutes. A destroyer and a submerged submarine are maneuverable. A destroyer and a submarine running on the surface in formation at 12 knots in 3-meter swells are 2 vessels committed to their tracks by physics and momentum. The cost of this transit was not in any budget line. The cost was in the precision required of every person aboard the Sullivans to hold their performance exactly at the level required for the next 23 minutes. The TAO had 19 hours on his feet. The helmsman had been at the wheel for 44 minutes without a significant correction. The captain had not eaten since 1800 the previous evening. These were not factors that showed on any radar screen or in any electronic signal the Vishnya was collecting. They were the unreported cost of every gray zone transit. The human accumulation of sustained attention under sustained pressure with no kinetic release and no conclusion that feels like resolution. At minute 31, both submarines' electronic systems registered the fire control radar in active mode. The response from the eastern Kilo was observable. Within 90 seconds of activation, the sail crew on the eastern submarine, the contact at 1,100 yards to starboard, began descending from the top of the sail. One figure went below, then a second. By 12:18 p.m., the eastern Kilo's sail was empty. The captain watched this through his binoculars from the bridge wing without comment. He lowered them after 60 seconds. He went back inside. He picked up his coffee cup, which was cold, set it back down without drinking it, and looked at the radar plot. The eastern Kilo had not changed course. Its speed was unchanged. Its position in the formation was unchanged. The sail crew going below was a behavior, not a navigation event. But in the language of extended formation pressure, a crew withdrawing from the exposed top of a submarine sail is a signal that something aboard that vessel has changed, whether that is discomfort, a command decision, or the beginning of a pre-dive sequence. The captain did not know which it was. That uncertainty, observable behavior without confirmed interpretation, is the standard condition of every gray zone standoff. You read what you can read. You hold what you can hold. The Vishnya continued its sweep. The western Kilo's sail crew remained visible. At 12:25 p.m., minute 34, the formation was still locked. 34 minutes of parallel track course and speed hold, 2 submarines and 1 destroyer moving northeast through the Barents at 12 knots, the overcast thickening, the swells holding steady. The fire control radar had been in active mode for 11 minutes. The eastern Kilo's sail was still empty. The western Kilo's crew had not moved. A particular kind of silence settles over a bridge crew in the 30 to 40 minute range of a sustained standoff. Not the silence of the first minutes, which is disciplined and alert. A deeper quiet, the silence of people who have understood that this will not resolve quickly and have chosen to metabolize that understanding into stillness. The bridge team on the Sullivans had not changed watch. The helmsman from the second watch had now been holding his heading for 34 minutes. His back ached. He was not going to mention it. A 1.5-degree shift on the western Kilo's course had been logged by the TAO at minute 28. He had reported it to the bridge at minute 31. The captain had acknowledged it. Neither man had spoken further about it. The shift was small enough to be navigational noise. It was also taken together with the eastern Kilo's sail crew descending, the beginning of what the captain had learned in 28 years to recognize as a formation losing confidence in its own timeline. The money on both sides of this standoff was substantial. The Sullivans represented $2.1 billion in U.S. Navy investment, her systems, her training pipeline, her strategic position in the Arctic rotation. The two Kilo-class submarines alongside her represented a combined construction and operational value running to several $100 million. The Vishnya added another substantial figure. The VMF was burning significant operational budget to hold a formation that had, as of minute 34, produced no course change from the American destroyer. Every additional minute of formation hold without a U.S. course change was another minute of Russian investment producing nothing. The captain had not thought about it in those terms. He was thinking about the 1.5-degree shift and what it indicated about the Western Kilo's helmsman. A helmsman who is confident in his orders holds his heading. A helmsman who is beginning to treat his orders as open for reconsideration drifts. At 12:31 p.m., minute 40, the Eastern Kilo's speed increased by an increment the TAO caught on radar before the bridge updated. The captain was already looking at the plot when the report came up. The Eastern Kilo had added approximately 0.8 knots, barely measurable at this distance, not enough to break formation immediately, but enough to create a geometry change that would, if sustained, pull the Eastern Kilo ahead of the Sullivans beam within the next 6 to 8 minutes. This was the tell. Not dramatic, not a visible turn, not a flag signal, not a radio call. A fractional speed increase on a contact that had been perfectly locked for 40 minutes, observed by the TAO on radar, confirmed by a second plot reading 90 seconds later. A 0.8 knot speed change is not visible from the bridge. It is the kind of signal that exists only in the numbers, readable only by someone who has been watching the numbers long enough to notice when they move. The captain noted it. He did not communicate it to the bridge crew. He set his binoculars on the console and watched the clock. At 12:35 p.m., minute 44, the Western Kilo's course shifted by 2.1 degrees to port. This one was visible from the bridge, not dramatic. A subtle change in the angle of the submarine's bow relative to the Sullivan's beam, the kind of correction that reads as intentional only to someone who knows what deliberate course hold looks like and can recognize when it ends. The watch officer on the bridge saw it and said nothing. The captain saw it and said nothing. They had both been watching the same geometry for 44 minutes. At 12:37 p.m., minute 46, both submarines had pulled ahead of the Sullivan's beam by approximately 400 yards. Their combined geometry had shifted from a flanking hold to a leading position, no longer alongside, now slightly forward, the triangular formation with the Sullivans at the trailing point, dissolving as both kilos moved incrementally ahead. And at 12:38 p.m., minute 47, they accelerated. Not a dramatic sprint. A measured increase, 2.5 to 3 knots, sustained over 90 seconds, both submarines pulling ahead with the deliberateness of a vessel that has made a decision and is executing it without the appearance of haste. The Eastern Kilo accelerated first. The Western Kilo followed 11 seconds later. Within 3 minutes, they were 1,200 yards ahead of the Sullivan's bow, still on the surface, now pulling away from the formation they had held for 47 minutes. At 12:41 p.m., the Eastern Kilo dove. The surface disturbance of its dive was visible from the bridge, a change in the water ahead, the submarine's hull descending, the sail the last element to clear, and then the Barents Sea closing over it as if it had never been there. The Western Kilo maintained surface position for another 4 minutes. Its sail crew had come back up, visible again at the top of the conning tower, watching the Sullivan's diminishing profile as the destroyer continued northeast. At 12:45 p.m., the Western Kilo dove. The pattern of its dive was the same as the first, clean, unhurried, deliberate. The Barents received it. The surface returned to 3-meter swells and gray-green water under a low overcast. The Vishnya altered course at 12:47 p.m., breaking off from its trailing track and turning southwest. Its collection sweep ended. The formation was over. The Arctic transit lane remained open. The captain stood at the center of the bridge for another minute after the Vishnya's departure track resolved on radar. His hands were still flat on the console lip. The compass heading had not changed. The helmsman from the second watch was still at the wheel. The bridge was quiet in the way of a room that has been silent for a long time and has nothing left to prove by speaking. The captain picked up his cold coffee. He drank it. The fire control radar remained in active mode for 6 additional minutes as a precautionary measure against the submerging contacts. It was stood down at 12:51 p.m., when both submarines were assessed as having cleared the formation's geometry. The TAO noted the stand-down in the CIC log with a timestamp and a single line of notation. The TAO's relief arrived in CIC at 1 p.m. The outgoing TAO briefed the incoming one in under 3 minutes. Contact summary, current picture, Vishnya track, assessment of both submarines as having cleared. Standard handover language, professional, clipped, complete. The outgoing TAO walked off the CIC watch station and went below. He sat in the passageway outside his stateroom for 2 minutes before going inside. He did not know he was doing it until he had been sitting there for 1.5 minutes, 20 hours on watch. 20 hours of sustained CPA tracking, formation management, escalation authorization, and signal analysis in an environment specifically designed to produce pressure without producing an incident. He had done his job. He sat in the passageway and let his nervous system process what his professional training had spent 20 hours suppressing. He went inside after 2 minutes. He did not tell anyone about the 2 minutes in the passageway. He would remember them for a long time. Somewhere in a VMF facility in the Northwest Military District, the officer who had coordinated the Kilo formation filed his patrol report at 14:20 local time. He wrote the encounter in standard operational language: transit observation, surface position maintained, contact data recorded, formation disengaged as per schedule. He recorded the course and speed of the American destroyer throughout the 47-minute formation hold. He recorded the activation of fire control radar at minute 23 of the formation, noted it under electronic emissions, logged the frequency, logged the duration. He recorded the Vishnya's collection data summary as an attachment. He did not write a recommendation, he wrote facts. He sealed the report in the standard classification envelope, set it on the stack for the evening distribution, and sat back in his chair. He wrote nothing about the Eastern Kilo's sail crew coming down at minute 31. He wrote nothing about the speed change at minute 40. He looked at what he had written for a moment. He had been a VMF staff officer for 16 years. He recognized a report that told the truth of the numbers and left the truth of the outcome to be inferred. He sealed it. 2 submarines, 1 American destroyer. 47 minutes of sustained parallel track formation in the Arctic Transit Corridor, with a Vishnya intelligence collection ship in attendance and fire control radar active for 24 of those 47 minutes. The corridor was open when the formation ended. It was open because the course of a 9,200-ton American destroyer had not changed by a single degree in 47 minutes of coordinated pressure. Sail crews visible at 800 yards, electronic collection sweeping everything the Sullivans transmitted, and a targeting solution active on both submarines simultaneously. 2 Russian submarines. 47 minutes of sustained Arctic formation. 1 Vishnya intelligence collection ship, closing to 2 nautical miles in continuous sweep. 1 fire control radar activation, running for 24 minutes with both contacts in simultaneous targeting track. Sail crew on the Eastern Kilo at 800 yards, visible to the naked eye for 31 minutes before descending below deck at minute 39. CPA, 800 yards to port, 1,100 yards to starboard, held for the full 47 minutes without reduction. Course adjustments by the Sullivans, 0. Knots reduced, 0. Inches yielded, 0. The pencil mark in the Sullivans navigation log, entered at 12:38 p.m. for the position at closest sustained formation proximity, was 800 yards to the nearest kilo. The notation beside it read, "Formation opened." It did not explain what had produced that result. The log, it did not need to explain it. The position spoke for itself.